الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم للذين أحسنوا الحسنى وزيادة ولا يرهق وجوههم قتر ولا ذلة أولئك أصحاب الجنة هم فيها خالدون والذين كسبوا السيئات جزاء سيئة بمثلها وترهقهم ذلة ما لهم من الله من عاصم كأنما أغشيت وجوههم قطعا من الليل مظلما أولئك أصحاب النار هم فيها خالدون ويوم نحشرهم جميعا ثم نقول للذين أشركوا مكانكم أنتم وشركاؤكم فزيلنا بينهم وضل عنهم ما كانوا يفترون صدق الله العظيم.
Are you okay, Riyad?
I am.
Yeah, I think he's done.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and start then, inshallah.
Yeah, inshallah.
Everything's set for, okay, Facebook, okay. Good. All right. Right. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wassalam ala Rasulillah. Begin with the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the compassionate, the merciful. And inshallah today, of course, we will continue to talk about the major issue that is pressing upon us all. And that is that we are in a state and an age where we have some unprecedented access, if you will, to seeing some of the things that have otherwise been happening behind closed doors or behind a situation where really nobody else has been behaving properly, if you will. That, you know, the case of course, George Fort and all of the other horrible instances that have happened. And it's important really that we pause for a moment, despite having heard so much about it, and understand that it isn't about a few racist cops. It isn't even that we have a few more racist people and behaviors than we might have imagined before we could see all the videos, for those of us who didn't see it on an ongoing basis in our communities, but that our country was in fact built upon planned racism. And it's an idea that's been nurtured for more than 200 years now. And I highly recommend that everybody read Howard Zinn's book called A People's History of the United States. And he tells the story of the actual peoples of the United States. He helps us see the realities of what happened, not just the whitewashed version that we get in the public schools today, but the actual events that happened. We can understand, as we see when Christopher Columbus comes across, he was no hero. He was a murderous, evil villain. He committed genocide. He wiped out, you know, literally generations of people, of completely annihilated some of the native peoples and the places that he went, enslaving them, searching for the gold that he was after. So it's important. We have to know this is how things were based and what they were built upon. We need to understand that this is something that our governments, from the earliest first governments, would continue against the Native Americans and the Mexicans when they came across them in their land grab. Keep in mind that when the whites came, they were just taking over all of the land. They were entering into false treaties. They would turn around and trust and documents that they had written. They lied to the people. They tricked them. They manipulated them. They oppressed them. This sort of behavior happened consistently across the board. And then in order for the minority of people to maintain hold over the majority, they had to then come up with ways to have those people fight amongst themselves. So they specifically set up laws and rules and structures so that the people, the blacks would be against the poor whites who didn't have any slaves, and that they both would be against the Native Americans, and those Native Americans would be. So all of these people, they caused them to fight each other. They created laws that put them at odds with each other, that punished them disproportionately, unequally with the others, and so forth. So all of these things happened so that they could maintain their power. But what it did was instill this sense of racism deep within the country, within the peoples of the country. And this is why we have the issues that we see today. Because again, it's not just one bad apple, but rather it's a system that has consistently generated and continued to propagate these types of behaviors and attitudes, which ultimately, of course, we know are satanic. This is exactly what Shaitan is in trouble for, right? His arrogance, his idea that I'm better than Adam. I'm created out of fire, he's created out of clay. And so it's this sort of behavior that has continued on. And this is the idea that's propagated, and this is why we're having this issue that we have today. So we need to be, number one, aware that this is the reality that we're facing. So it's a major issue. Now, there's a gentleman named Brian Wilson who is addressing some of these points, and he makes a number of really good points. And one of the most salient points I think he makes is that he says rallies and protests are good, they're important to have because they help raise awareness of the issue. However, they do not bring about change. He said when people think about Martin Luther King and his marches and his speech, people get very excited, and then they tend to just jump forward in time to where we are now in terms of some of the changes that came in terms of laws and so forth, saying, oh, that's because Martin Luther King was there and fighting for this change and improvement. But they're skipping over the actual work that brought about the change. And what he's saying is that change happens when you have legislation. Okay, so protests don't bring about change, and voting doesn't bring about change. Okay, it's important to vote, please vote, but voting doesn't really bring about change. And if voting did bring about change, then surely 8 years of a black president would have resolved some of these issues. But clearly it's not. It's just as bad as it ever was, perhaps even worse in some cases. So voting doesn't bring about change. But what brings about change is legislative change, changing the laws that enable a lot of the things that happen to keep happening. So, for example, there are things that protect police officers who misbehave, who commit criminal acts, who act based on prejudice and racist behaviors and attitudes that allow them to basically get away with it, as we've seen in so many cases. I'm not even going to mention the cases where we've seen police officers still even keep their jobs even. They don't even lose their job after they've committed murder and things like that. So these are some of the things that laws can help bring about change. We can have laws that help improve the selection process of police officers, the evaluation, the mental evaluation of police officers, what happens in cases where like the police system itself, how that is put together. So laws can help change these kinds of things. But legislative change happens at a cost. And it goes back to the golden rule, right? You know what the golden rule is, right? He who has the gold makes the rules. And that's the way it is. And so it's about the idea of having economic power as a community. And so that means that as a national community, if you say, for example, as the Muslim community or as the Black community, we're not going to go out to any fast food restaurants, then those mega corporations are going to turn around and say, hey, well, we're not willing to lose your business. What do we need to do to help get that business back? So they start to put their economic weight and influence behind making the changes that are necessary, that we say as a community are necessary for our society to function well. And again, case in point, look at the gun lobby, the Zionist lobby, teachers unions, a few of the other big ones. They understand the principle and they bring that economic weight to bear. And that's what pushes the politicians ultimately to drive the laws that they want to see in place. So this is what I want us to really think about as a community, how we need to act and behave in terms of looking at bringing about positive change, because we can't simply sit around and do nothing, right? It's like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. O you who have attained faith, remain conscious of God and always speak with a will to bring out what is just and true, whereupon he will cause your deeds to be virtuous and forgive you of your sins, and know that whoever pays heed to Allah and his messenger has already attained a mighty triumph and victory. In other words, it is on us as Muslims to always speak out for what is just and for what is true. And so we have to be at the forefront of pushing for change. Yes, we do the protests. Yes, let's get out there and vote. But yes, let us also push for legislative change, demand that the laws start changing. And we can turn to organizations like CARE, for example, which lead the way in this type of work. And let's ask them, what do we need to do as the average citizen here? What is it that I can do to help bring about legislative change? And this is our challenge to CARE, to set things up so that we as the average citizen can say, what is it that we can do to help bring about this legislative change so that we see real change happening in the country so we can be a part of the solution. Now, that's number one. Number two, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, we need to look at ourselves. We need to clean our own house. Yes, it's important for us absolutely to stand against this kind of racist behavior and so forth, but we have to clean our own house. We know that the Prophet ﷺ, not only was he obviously not racist, but he was anti-racist. Everything he did was specifically teaching and showing us exactly that we cannot be racist, because again, we have to understand that racism is rooted in arrogance. Racism is rooted in arrogance. This is why Shaitan was upset with Adam, because he felt he was better. So the fact that he said, well, I'm from fire and he's from clay, that was his excuse, right? He needed to come up with something to tell Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala why he felt he was better than Adam. So he picked something that was obvious, no different than skin color, right? I'm red fire, he's black clay, so I'm better than he is. And this is where we have to really be honest with ourselves. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that whoever has even an ounce of arrogance will never even smell paradise. I want us to think about this. Whoever has even an ounce of arrogance will never even smell paradise. Won't even get close enough to smell paradise. Now, that should make us really sit back and ask ourselves, what is my state? What is my state? Now, we may say, oh, come on, I'm not racist. But we need to think about that. Have any of us actually made a sincere dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah remove from our heart any ghil, any ill will, any ill feeling, any sense of superiority that we might have over anybody else? Because when we look around in our community, unfortunately, we see too many instances of racism. Sometimes it's blatant. Sometimes you openly see people looking suspiciously at somebody, treating somebody of a different skin color, of a different nationality in a way that's unjust and unfair. But sometimes it's less subtle, or sorry, sometimes it's more subtle than that. Sometimes it's just a function of there's no real communication. There's no real issue of trust. Sometimes we find that families will not want to participate in a certain program because there's too many people of that kind that are there. And by the way, when we talk here about racism, it's not just racism against skin color. There's racism as in, oh, well, you know, those non-Arabs. Oh, you know, those non-Desis. Oh, you know, those guys who are more like this, right? So this racism is multifaceted. And so we shouldn't blind ourselves into thinking that just because I may not be racist against Black people doesn't mean that I don't harbor some racist beliefs or attitudes. And again, the real question comes back to, am I feeling arrogant? Am I feeling in any way superior to anybody else? You know, what is it that's in my own heart? Have I asked Allah to purify me, to purify my heart from any sort of arrogant belief against anybody? And by that, I mean those things that I may know of and those that I don't know of. Because of course, how do I know I have an inherent bias against somebody if I don't believe I have that bias? So I need to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to purify me from that which I know of and that which I don't know of. And we really need to have that heart to heart with ourselves that says, what is the condition of my heart as I look to other people? Do I in fact truly feel better than others? Because we know what's established is that the Prophet said that you know, the white is no better than the Black, the Arab is no better than the non-Arab, and the only difference in terms of quality of person with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is taqwa, right? Is their level of piety. And since none of us have little piety meters on our shirts to say, oh, I'm 80% pious, oh, you're only 40% pious, yes, I can see I'm twice as pious as you, right? We don't have that. So the reality is that if I'm being honest, what I know about myself are all of my shortcomings, all of my sins, all of my transgressions. And about you, I only know good things, right? I see you come to the masjid, you're praying, you're at Shamma, you're participating in the community, you're friendly, you're smiling. I don't see you gossiping. I don't see you committing any sins. So I only know good about you. So if I've got to be honest and say, okay, if you have to compare who's closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the reality is I would always have to say you. Why? Because I only know the good about you and I know all of my shortcomings. So if I have to add into the scales, yes, I know my good, but I know all of my shortcomings. And about you, I only know good. So logically, weighing the two, you, to my appearance, have only the good. I know you're not perfect, but in my mind, I generally think you're a good person. So yeah, I'm sure you do a few small sins here and there, but I'm gonna have to say, wow, I've got to be at the bottom of the list. And as I compare myself to everybody, that really should be like, man, I'm at the bottom of the list. So I have no room for arrogance, no room to assume that I'm better than anybody. Even the non-Muslim, we're told, because that person may tomorrow become Muslim, and then be twice the Muslim I am today. And so there should never be any feeling of arrogance, of being better than anybody. And that doesn't even account for the fact that whatever good that I have, whatever good that I can do, whatever abilities I have, whatever wealth I have, whatever talents I have, all that has just been a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not like I did anything for those things. I didn't deserve them. Allah simply gave them to me. So it's not a function of, I have no space to be arrogant or feeling so good about those things. Why? Allah gave them to me. So it's not me. So this is where we really have to do our heart check and say, you know what? I'm definitely not better than anybody. I'm probably worse, given what I know. And I can only ask that Allah improve my state and cleanse my heart. But that really needs to be the state for us to be in when it comes to how we deal with each other and how we think of each other. And it can be hard. But I want us, and this is my challenge to all of us, to really reflect on this aspect so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, may He always protect us from arrogance or having any sense of feeling of superiority or being better than anybody. And that is really to think about different people that we know. And I want you to think specifically about different people you don't like, right? People in our community, Muslims who you don't like, because that's where it's more prone to show itself. If I really like somebody, I'm generally not going to be thinking anyway that I'm better than them. I really like them, I make excuses for them, I'm going to think good things of them and so forth. But I want you to think of people that you're not particularly fond of, right? I'm not saying you have to hate them or anything, but maybe you're just not particularly fond of them. And I want you to really ask yourself why. And if you have any feeling that you might be better than that person. Now, it doesn't mean you have to like everybody. I mean, there's different personalities and so forth, and certainly we all don't like each other. I mean, it's not everybody that we want to say, yes, I want to come and hang out with you and spend the weekend with you and invite you over all the time. And that's no problem. We don't have to like everybody, but we should never feel superior to anybody else. And this is where, again, it has to be something that we do. No one else can do this for us. No one else can check our heart. No one else can even honestly say, oh, yes, you definitely are, definitely aren't. But we know, and it's something that we need to rectify in our own hearts because we have an accountability to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's very, very important that we understand that shaitan is always going to be pushing us to commit the same sins he does. As they say, misery loves company, and believe me, shaitan wants lots of company in the hellfire. And so he's going to push us and give us all the reasons and excuses to be arrogant, to be unjust. He's going to say, you don't need to go to a protest. You don't need to write your congressman. Someone else will do it. It doesn't really affect you. It's not your family. You can just sit back. You're a good person. You're not racist. Everything's fine, right? He'll try to get you to be lazy. If he can't do that, maybe he'll try to scare you. Oh, they're taking names at the protest. Oh, if you write your congressman, they'll know that you're a troublemaker, and then they're going to come and give you trouble. So he tries to frighten you. And the same thing when it comes to ourselves. Oh, mashallah, you're such a good person. You're so nice. Oh, look, you have a friend from each different race. Oh, remember, you sat with that other table of people from different nationalities than you at the last dinner, right? He's going to try to stroke your ego and make you think that you're in such great shape. And that person that you don't like, that in fact that you actually harbor some racist opinions for, he'll give you justifications as to why that person is a problem, or actually it's just that you don't like them and they just have a different personality and this excuse and that excuse, when the real reason that you have something in your heart against them is that you in fact feel that you're better than them. You worked harder, you were smarter, you put in more effort. So we have to be cautious of the trick of shaitan, because he's going to try to pull as many people down with him as possible. And we really have to, again, check our heart and say, do I in fact feel that I'm better than anybody else? And make that check against people of other races, of other colors, of other languages, because that's where you'll really start to see where the holes are in the self, so that we can start working to fix the self. Okay? And we need to remember, this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, وَإِنَّ هَذِهِ أُمَّتُكُمْ أُمَّةً وَاحِدَةً وَإِنَّ رَبَّكُمْ فَاتَّقُونَ فَقَطَّعُوا أَمْرَهُمْ بَيْنَهُمْ زُبُرًا كُلُّ حِزْبٍ بِمَا لَدَيْهِمْ فَرِحُونَ. And verily this brotherhood of yours, which includes, of course, our brothers and sisters, this brotherhood of yours is a single brotherhood, and I am your Lord and cherisher, therefore be conscious of me. But people have cut off their affairs of unity, dividing themselves into sects, each party rejoicing within that which is within itself. So Allah is telling us that for the believers, that we are one ummah, and we are equal with each other, and only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows the differences between us. Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. And He's the only one who will ever know. There's no way for us to know. And so we are one equal ummah of believers. And Allah is warning us about dividing ourselves into groups and being the black Muslims, the Arab Muslims, the Somali Muslims, the Palestinian Muslims, and so forth. No, we are Muslims. That's it. We're Muslims. We're one ummah. Yes, He created us as nations and tribes to get to know each other. Our differences, we celebrate. MashaAllah, I would love to try some of your food. I would love to learn more about your culture. I would love to understand how you guys behave or what you guys do in these circumstances and so on and so forth, right? These are things that we cherish, that we appreciate, that we value in each other. But it's a source of interest and friendship, not a source of division. And so I conclude with the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ on the authority of Abu Hurairah, who said that the Messenger of Allah, peace and blessings be upon him, said, do not envy one another, do not inflate prices to one another, do not hate one another, do not turn away from one another, and do not undercut one another, but be you, O servants of Allah, brothers. A Muslim is the brother of a Muslim. He neither oppresses him, nor does he fail him. He neither lies to him, hold him in contempt. Piety is right here, and he pointed to his chest 3 times. It is evil enough for a man to hold his brother Muslim in contempt. The whole of a Muslim for another Muslim is inviolable. His blood, his property, and his honor. And inshallah, if we take this to heart and we cleanse our hearts and we make sincere dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah protect us from shaitan, that Allah purify our hearts and cleanse it of any feelings of arrogance for any other human being, that Allah remove any traces of racism or discrimination or negative prejudice from our hearts, that which we know about and that which we don't know about. And that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us a people who stand for truth and justice, who always speak for what is right, and who are at the forefront of bringing about ihsan, excellence, and adl, justice, to the communities we live in, to the countries we live in, and to the world we live in. Then inshallah, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raise us together under His shade when there's no other shade but His shade, and grant us all the very highest level of paradise, Jannat al-Firdaus, and place us in the close proximity of our beloved Messenger Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.